Welcome to Biscayne Stories, where neighbors meet neighbors. Today we're talking about the importance of understanding dyslexia. To do this, we have experts Amparo Velez, founder of Ave Learning, and Filipa Pitta, a dyslexic student. Welcome, ladies, on the show. How are you guys doing today?
Thank you. Very good. I'm very excited to be here.
As well.
We have icebreakers on the show, and the question is for you, Amparo, first, is what is the most inspirational thing that somebody has told you?
I think that for me personally is a very simple thing that you get told a lot of times, and it is that you can achieve whatever you want to achieve. It doesn't matter who you are or what you think. You can do it. It's very simple, but it's just that you can do it. Yeah.
What about you, Filipa?
Most inspirational thing someone has ever told me was, I think it's a quote by Nelson Mandela. It's not word per word, but he says that, don't judge me by my success, judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again. And then it really taught me the importance of failure. If you didn't have the failures that you had, you would never have the success that you achieved.
Wonderful. All right. So I guess the first thing to start this podcast is to understand what dyslexia is.
Dyslexia is a learning disability, but I don't like to see it as a disability. But it's just a different way in which people learn how to read, write, and spell. And our brains just filter in information differently than others. But it's just a different way of processing information. Usual school systems might not be aware, but it's not a disability, so to say.
I agree with Filipa completely. I think that dyslexia is something that you just use your brain in a different way, Scientifically, we all have something called the reading triangle, and everybody has to be able to make those neural connections to be able to learn how to read. But it's just that dyslexic thinkers learn to make that dyslexia triangle connections in a different way. Schools right now a lot are teaching poorly how to read, write, and do all of those things in general, but more specifically to dyslexic students. It's really hard to find a school right now that's actually teaching literacy in the correct way.
So why don't you think that schools have this support for dyslexic students?
What's going on right now in a lot of schools in the United States is that there has been this train of thinking that says that we should teach kids how to read in a way that in paper sounds beautiful, and it's called balanced literacy. And it means a student learns by, I give you a book and I'm like, oh, learn to love reading and find a cute corner and read this book. And it's like a 4-year-old with a book and no instruction of vowels or phonics, very little phonics, very little reading comprehension, and very little explicit teaching of how we learn how to read, how to master that reading triangle I was talking about before. And it was a big trend. And right now in the United States, it's a peak moment because they're realizing, this didn't work. 80% of our third graders are not reading above grade level or on grade level. So now they're trying to question what's going on, what are we doing wrong? So it's the perfect moment actually to take the shift and teach literacy how it's supposed to be taught, which is through structured literacy based on the science of reading, which is the way in which dyslexics are more successful at learning how to read, but it's also the way in which most students can learn how to read, not only dyslexics. So it's not just the dyslexia issue, but it's also a whole issue. And then you just add on top of that huge issue the fact that dyslexics do need accommodations or other types of support, and you've got a huge, huge issue in the educational field right there.
And Filipa, as a student, do you feel like there's been this support or accommodation, says?
As a student in the public school, I think that there's a lot of quote-unquote accommodations. Like, I have received the accommodations I need to be successful, but there is no support, because a lot of people think that support comes through accommodation, but support one-on-one is not the same thing as receiving accommodation. And I see that right now in the public school system, there is no support for dyslexics like me or anything. And that's really crazy to think. And I'm like, where are all of them? Like, I'm not the only one. So how do they survive if they never had these supports? And what I find out, the sad thing is that many of them end up going homeschool or dropping out of school because they don't receive that support in time to help them stay in the education system. And that's really unfortunate. Personally, I believe that. So I'm grateful that I did get the support. Like other schools that I've attended, not in America, I've gotten support of reading and writing, and I've gone through Barton programs and programs for dyslexics or people with learning disability. That has helped me, and I know if I didn't go through those programs, I'd not be where I am today. So I think it's really important to give the support to the people that need it.
And when you're talking about accommodations and support, accommodations meaning like you need more time for the test or flexibilities like that.
Yeah.
And then support meaning like additional things to help you understand. What do you mean by support exactly?
Support is working personally for me, working with a program. I don't think public schools, they have a program in place for people with struggle with reading or learning disabilities, to help them get the tools they need to function in a day-to-day classroom. So that's what I think about support.
And it's for an accommodation, I need this book and an audiobook, so that I can read the 50 pages for homework, or I need extra time on the test, or, can the teacher share the notes with me so that I can pay attention in the class and not have to worry about writing while I'm listening. But when it comes to support, for students like Filipa, and even I feel when you're younger, it was when it was so crucial for you to receive that support of just having a program that's based on structured literacy. Like Barton, there's also Wilson, and they're all based on Orton Gillingham, So programs that focus on that. So student can sit with someone else like me, and you can receive that reading intervention. That's what we refer to as support, that type of thing.
Absolutely.
So Filipa, tell me about your dyslexic journey.
So for me, I was diagnosed in the 3rd grade, and at that point in the 3rd grade, I was not reading up to 3rd grade level. I was below 1st grade level. So my school made the intervention to hold me back a year. And for me, as a dyslexic student, that was really hard because I felt like I was a failure, so to say, because I was not even being able to advance to the next level. And that's when I put in my head that I assumed that dyslexia was gonna stop me from achieving anything I desired to achieve. But now I know that's not the case. And I'm grateful that I've changed my mindset from then. But since then, I've been able to skip a grade and skip 2 math grades. And I think that due to me having dyslexia and due to having it harder, so to say, not having it the easy route, I had it harder. I had to work much harder than my peers to get to where I wanted to get. When I got the opportunity to skip a grade, they told me it was going to be challenging, but I didn't want it easy, so I took the opportunity. And the same thing came to when skipping two math grades. I took the opportunity, even if it meant putting a lot of work into it. I was dedicated to do that, and I already had put so much work to get to where I got, and I was not going to stop there. So I think that having it harder and being dyslexic is truly what brought me to where I am today.
And what you mean by skipping, you mean you tested out, you advanced forward.
Yes.
And what about you, Amparo? What is your dyslexic journey?
For me, it was similar to Filipa. I was diagnosed not in 3rd grade, but in 2nd grade with dyslexia. And I don't even know if I was in like 1st grade or kinder. I was not reading, at all. And for me, it was just, I felt like a failure. And I just didn't know why. I feel like it was really hard because I remember there was this time where the kids and the parents would sit and they would like read a book, and then they would switch, like another parent would come, and then you would read a book, and then another parent would come and you would read another one. And I remember that while my peers like read with all the parents, I just stayed with the first parent that was my parent, and I was trying to read the cover of the book. And I feel like that's like a perfect description of how I felt for many years when I didn't get the support needed. And then as I grew up, I hated education. I didn't like teachers, I didn't like books, I didn't like anything. But it was because I wasn't believing in myself. And as time passed, I realized that something that I was really good at was helping others, because dyslexia gave me like this empathy to understand what it's like from a very small age, what it is to feel like you can't do it alone and that you need support. So I was very empathetic, and I went on to college and I studied social work. And then in social work, I realized like what's the best way that I can help others, and I was like, it's through education. And I became special education teacher, and then I focused on dyslexia and ADHD. And it has been very interesting to see how my perspective has changed throughout, and how that has such a strong impact on you as a child. And I think that's one of the most important things that you have to do with a child that's dyslexic. You have to have an environment where they can feel supported, because it can really shift your educational pathway, right?
I want to take a break and thank Juan Bernhards here at 3G Tutoring for lending me his space. Thanks to him, we can do interviews in person, which is great. So moving on, let's talk about parents. Parents are also part of this journey. I'm sure they've struggled not understanding what's happening, especially early in a dyslexia discovery stage. But Filipa, can you tell us a little bit about your parents' journey?
So for my family, we didn't know what learning disabilities were. We were not aware of it. So my family totally understands other parents and other families that they never knew what learning disabilities were. What we commonly hear with other children that are diagnosed is, oh, we never knew this existed. We never knew anything about this. But you truly do learn. And with my family, my parents were super supportive in my dyslexia journey, especially my father. and he always showed me that it's such an incredible thing to be dyslexic. He worked with a lot of people he did machine learning at his company. He worked with people that did computer science, and he said, I have an incredible person that works with me that is with computer science. He's the best, like one of the best in the world, and he's dyslexic. And he would always tell me that, like, he's so proud, and he always tells his like people that he works with, my daughter's dyslexic, she's super incredible. I think I was the most ashamed out of my whole family of being dyslexic. My parents were never ashamed. I was super ashamed, but like their view of dyslexia really helped me change my view of dyslexia and see it as the positive thing it is. They really did help me.
What about you, Amparo? Have your parents been part of your dyslexia journey?
So in my family, it's a little bit different than in Filipa's family, where you are the only dyslexic, right? In my family, all of us are dyslexic. My parents and my 3 younger brothers. But me being the oldest, I was the first person in my family to be diagnosed. Once my diagnosis came in, my parents were like, oh, this is like, I was like this, you know, I struggled with reading. It was, you know, I failed a grade or things like that, you know. So I think that in my journey, it was really hard at first, because it was some years before Filipa. So in that time where I was living in Costa Rica, there was not a lot of awareness of what dyslexia was. So they told my mother that being dyslexic was like, she's not going to learn a second language. She's not going to learn how to read, not even like college. So it was really scary for my mom and for my dad at first. But then as time passed, it's been really cool to see how just their view and their support and their willing to learn what dyslexia is really changed everything. My mom would research, she would go onto Google, she would buy books. I remember she had like 10 books about dyslexia, and she was just trying to learn what it was. And slowly she stumbled upon a book called The Dyslexic Advantage, and that really shifted everything for her. And I've seen the support she has given me and my 3 younger brothers, and just our view of dyslexia is very privileged, because I feel like many dyslexic kids that I work with, you have to work with the parents also for them to understand what dyslexia is, in order for them to be successful. Because if the parent does not accept it,
Absolutely.
then the kid is gonna be stuck thinking like, oh, like this sucks, right?
I agree with that. I think my situation is also really privileged that my mom has your mom, the same as your mom. My mom really wanted to know as much as possible about dyslexia, so she did the whole she learned the program, everything. She studied it for like months so that she could like teach me herself with the program, with BART and other programs, like so we could practice at home and do those things. My mom read so many books, and like she really wanted to understand and comprehend the struggles of her own child as much as possible. And my father, he was always so open. My father was a man, he always read books, so many books. And so I think he might not had really understood like what dyslexia is, but he was always there through my education process, always advocating for me, especially my mom too. And we had a growth mindset that everything is an opportunity to learn and grow, and nothing is truly a failure. So even though my parents aren't dyslexics like yours, they were really, really supportive.
If my kid is dyslexic, what resources are out there? What can I do?
So the first step is diagnosis. Like, you have to be diagnosed with dyslexia, but to get there, there's a few things that you should do before. Of course, with the teacher or whoever's working with your child, you have to be on the lookout for, early signs or like any sign that your child might be dyslexic. The signs vary between ages. Of course, they're not going to be the same if your child is in preschool as if they are in high school. Let's say for a preschooler, it's like trouble with rhyming or learning the alphabet and the names of the letters and the sounds of the letters, mispronouncing very familiar like baby talk words, like papa, mama, stuff like that, not recognizing very simple words like cat. And another one is family history. That one's a little bit harder, but if you yourself are dyslexic, there's a 70% chance that your child might be dyslexic. And if you and your spouse are dyslexic, it's 100% chance that your child is dyslexic. So that would be for like younger kids. And as you go older, you also have to be looking at the emotional side. So maybe a kid that doesn't believe in themselves so much. They're not really good at reading as a whole or comprehension, but sometimes dyslexia, as Filipa, you were saying before the show, it's not only about reading, but it can also be about spelling, it's very broad. But absolutely. What I would recommend is if you're not sure and you don't want to do a diagnosis, start with a screener. You can do a dyslexia screener. You can search for a professional that does those. And those are much cheaper. They're like $90, $100. And then you can see if your child has dyslexic traits. And then they have a lot of dyslexic traits. Let's do the diagnosis.
Yeah, absolutely.
So pre-podcast, you were telling me about that parents sometimes have trouble diagnosing their kids.
So I think the trouble with that normally comes from the misconception of what dyslexia is and how Filipa was, giving the description of what dyslexia is. And a lot of them see it as a disability. So they're afraid of labeling their child with a disability. When in reality, I think in my case, it was like, it helped me. It was hard at first, but it helped me understand myself, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I think that would be it. Just parents are scared to label their child with a disability because they don't know what dyslexia really is,
In the public school system, in terms of diagnosis, children in the public school system are not diagnosed as quote unquote dyslexic. They're diagnosed with a learning disability, which I think that is awful because the child doesn't truly know what they have. I know that I do have a learning disability and it is dyslexia, but not many people that the school does not provide that, so many kids cannot say, oh, I'm dyslexic. They can just say, I have a learning disability, which sounds terrible. When you're struggling with stuff and your friends ask you, what's the matter? You say, I have a learning disability. They think you have a disability in learning, you learn poorly or you're weak. Doesn't mean the case. I've met so many incredible dyslexics at my school, teachers that have PhDs in chemistry and those things. They have profound ability to learn incredibly, and their brains work so incredibly. So it's not, I don't think it's great that the school just labels it as a learning disability. I wish that schools could provide specific diagnosis that kids could know what they had.
So do you know why it is that schools don't provide the label or the diagnosis of dyslexia? So it's because of funding. So schools, if they say that a student has dyslexia or another, learning difference, they have to provide all of the supports for that learning difference. So they would have to have Barton or Wilson or something like that, and they should have the teachers to be able to do that. So, of course, having a school is super hard, but having children that are not learning in the school is much harder because you're not doing your job. So in most of the cases in like states in Florida and others, that's the case. They don't say that, and it's very political.
So right now, you're saying that if I'm dyslexic in schools, I see more of the accommodations, like extra time or things of that nature, but not so much of the support because it requires funding, right?
Absolutely. Like, you will see no support, at least in high school. But I feel like high school is also not really the crucial part in which you should intervene. I don't know the case in terms of elementary, but in high school we have no support. We only have like accommodations, which is like extra time, and like my listening, so I get everything like my audio read to me. But in terms of like being provided like assistance, no, like absolutely. And that is like the case.
And if you think about it, it's like if there's a student that's dyslexic and hasn't been diagnosed in high school, they're probably the ones that need the most help, you know, because they're probably have been struggling for years, have low self-esteem, don't know how to read properly, probably are like super street smart where they're passing the grades by like, you know, like doing other things, you know, looking for summaries of the books, or I have heard about students that come to like that same accommodations by themselves. They're like go home and they'll read the book in audiobook, and they have like all this structure that they had to invent themselves to be able to get the support, when in reality if they get a diagnosis, the support is there, like do this instead of them having to look for everything.
That's why I think that kids shouldn't be taught to like learn to survive in the system, but learn to advocate in the system. Because what I see with many kids is like, especially with middle school, because in high school, like most of these kids are either doing that or they dropped out and they're like in homeschool or those things. But like in terms of middle school, you see a lot of these things, and instead of trying to like survive, like getting passing grades like D's or C's, like you should learn, these kids should be taught to advocate for the accommodations and assistance they need so that they can get their grades. Because prior to my accommodations, I failed and get only D's. After getting my accommodations, I'm a straight A student now. And so you can see the contrast. So I don't want people to learn how just to survive, but to like ask for accommodations, know how to advocate for the things that they need.
Not only survive, but learn, right? Be able to learn.
Yeah, 100%.
So you're saying that the school has provided the accommodations and you have improved in your grades.
Yeah, but
What?
I wouldn't be at the place I am today if I didn't have the support in my youth, when I was in elementary. If I didn't have the support that I needed through the program of Barton, which was my case, I went through the program of Barton, and if I didn't have that support and learn how to read and like write and the phonetics of everything and the English language, I wouldn't be where I am today. And those accommodations only work because I got the support I did in elementary.
So when you mean the support, this is outside of school?
No, the support was provided by the school.
Oh, in this case, in your elementary, they provided you with the accommodations and the support you needed.
Yeah.
But the school was not in the United States.
Yeah,
right?
it was a private school in Costa Rica.
Okay, got it. So I guess how would the ideal space in a school look like? How can a school provide, or better yet, a school can provide accommodations. That's easy, extra time, stuff like that. They do that for all sorts of.
And sometimes it's still a struggle though, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how would a school provide support properly if they had the funding? Let's say funding was not our issue.
So I think the thing is more of what I was talking earlier with how before in schools there was a like fixation to teach kids through the balanced literacy, like loving to read and hugging books and finding a cozy nook and learning to read magically. Like that's how kids were taught they were going to learn how to read. But shifting back to the structure of literacy, where yes, you can love to read, but you have to actually teach kids how to read so that they can love reading. So if a school has that structured literacy, I think that's a very important aspect. And then the other one is just that awareness. I think that dyslexia awareness of what dyslexia really is. A lot of schools now are afraid of having dyslexic students because it might need, you're gonna need so many supports, and we don't have the time for that, like things like that, or you can't learn a second language, like like a second language. We're bilingual, right? You're trilingual. So things like that. What would you say, like as a student?
In terms of support, I think like having those programs, like because these programs like that teach Barton or like other programs, it's an outsider that the school contracts to come in, but usually in public school they do not have that ability to bring these outsiders in. But if they did have these people that could enroll these kids that need the support into these programs so that they learn how to read and write and spell and learn everything about the English language and like the phonemics of everything, that would be very good and would be very helpful for many kids.
So Amparo, Ave Learning, right, that's what your business is. So you started, you specialize in helping kids with dyslexia, right? So tell me about Ave Learning.
So in Ave Learning, my focus is of like having a more holistic approach when it comes to helping a kid with dyslexia. I like to work with the families, for them to actually understand what dyslexia is, and so that parents can also support their children, right? Because I go and I work with the kids for like 2 hours a week, and we do a lot of structured literacy. Like I teach them with a similar method than Barton. It's called Wilson, and we do that. But I don't like to only stay on that, but I like to accompany the parents in the journey of understanding dyslexia, how they can help their kids. If they have to go to a meeting to the school, I'll go with the parents, help them learn how to advocate for their child. And then also teaching kids, like, just like, hey, I'm dyslexic too. Like, we can, you can do this. You can learn how to read, even though, like, you've been struggling with this for a long time. And I think it's a program or a method designed to helping kids learn how to read, not only through structured literacy, but also through advocacy and empowerment. It's actually, A is for advocating, V is for valuing dyslexia, and E is for empowering dyslexia. So that's
awesome.
What we do.
Okay. I'll put all the information in the show notes for those who are interested in reaching out to learn more about that. So Filipa, I have a question for you. What would you say to kids with dyslexia?
I want to start off by saying that I think the dyslexic community is one of the most incredible communities I've ever met, and I'm so proud today to be dyslexic, and I want to share this message with others that being dyslexic is not going to stop you. It's not going to impair you from doing what you wish to do. And the struggles that come with dyslexia, with working much harder and having to put a lot of work into your work, into your homework or your education to get to where your peers are, that strength is going to assist you in various aspects of your life, not just in education, but in your work, in your job. And with that strength, you can do a lot of incredible things. and I know an incredible teacher. He has really inspired me this year, my sophomore year of high school, and he has a PhD in chemistry, but he's super dyslexic. And he said to me that in middle school, he was diagnosed as like mentally retarded, not even like learning disability. They're like, oh, your son is mentally retarded, like he'll never learn, he'll never be able to graduate high school, and he has been able to get his PhD in chem. And he taught me that if it wasn't for his struggle with dyslexia, he would never have persisted on to get his PhD. And he says, because of my struggle, it made the journey of getting my PhD easier because I've already been through so much prior to that. So it gives you, dyslexia gives you a really big tool to help you in other aspects in your life, and you can reach any heights. Yeah.
Awesome. And as a closing question for you, Amparo, as the Key Biscayner, what is your favorite part of living in the Key?
I think for me, it's definitely the beach. I think that being able to go to the beach in the morning, or whenever I want to, is amazing.